welcome. It's 6:32 p.m. We have hopefully working technology, and I will call this regular meeting of the Waterbury Select Board to order for Monday, December 1st, 2025. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda. I know with the holiday, we have some changes that came in after this got posted.
I'll move to approve the agenda with amendments to the consent agenda, including a request to cater permit for Salt LLC, a special events permit for St. Johnsbury Distillery, and a request to cater permit for Monkey Hospitality.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kane, second by Roger to approve the agenda. Any other items?
And to reappoint, or I wouldn't add that to consent, would we?
No, you could add an item to appoint an E911 coordinator.
Yeah. I guess I will amend my own motion to include on the agenda right after consent, the approval of an E911 coordinator.
Second that as well.
Okay, we had a motion by Kane, second by Roger. Mike?
Yep. And can we add a separate agenda item, not on the consent agenda item? I know we've gotten several comments about the move of the Historical Society area and Planning Commission, and if we could discuss that.
Sure, run on the agenda.
Yep, somewhere, I would probably say, maybe after the review of updated special event.
You know, my Robert's Rules of Order are lacking at the moment. Do we want to vote on Mike's addition? Does someone want to second that?
Yeah, I'll second. I'm doing a lot of seconding. So.
Okay, all those in favor of Mike's item on the office space after special event permit, please say aye.
Aye.
And then we have the original motion for everything else. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, with that, we have the approved agenda. That brings us to the next item, which is consent agenda. That was the minutes of the select board meeting and the liquor license permits that Kane mentioned. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as previously amended.
Who wants it?
Mike.
All right, we had a motion by Kane and a second by Mike. Any questions on this? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next up, we have the item around an E911 coordinator. We'd be looking for a motion to appoint Cheryl Casey as our E911 coordinator.
I move to appoint Cheryl Casey as our E911 coordinator.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike. Any further discussion or questions on this? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next up is public.
Congratulations.
It does have to be a formal select board motion. Next up is public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to something that is not already on the agenda. We ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, and if needed, we're happy to schedule it for a future agenda item. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on public comment? Yes, and if you wouldn't mind just coming up to the table, it just helps with the owl. Thank you.
Katie Henderson, 25 North Main Street. I would like to request the use of the rec building for the next 2 weeks, potentially for my nonprofit to do gift collections. I typically do it in my garage, and when you have too many kids in this year, I'm a little concerned I'm not gonna have the room. And it's done by all volunteers from the Waterbury community. It's not all benefiting the Waterbury community, but we do have 128 kids this year that are going to get up to 5 gifts each, up to 600 gifts. So, nonprofit is in its own mark.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any questions from the board? I'll say in general, we try and not respond on public comment, but we can have someone follow up with you on that after the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was just wondering what the date was.
Oh yeah, sorry. Roger's asking about the dates.
So we are starting to collect gifts now, and if we could either start as soon as tomorrow or the next. The 15th or 16th would be. Personal.
Tom, is the space available?
Few meetings scheduled there, but generally. So. we just get a call.
Sounds like we'll have Tom follow up on the logistics. Anyone else who would like to speak on public comment? Anyone online or in the room? All right.
Yes.
With that, I will move us on if there's no other public comment to our next item, which is a Stanley Watson update. I know we had an update at our last meeting. I don't know that there's been any major changes, but I'll turn it over to Tom.
No major changes or updates since the last meeting. Just to want to know for the public that
Can you speak up again in case Tori shows up on Zoom? I know like got delayed. Thank you.
no updates since the last meeting. I do want to know for the public that if time permits for the select board, I would like to have a conversation about the redevelopment agreement we've discussed in executive session. So we are advancing that in executive session. Hopefully, doesn't mean I'm anticipating any action. It just means we're working through the process with the board in executive session.
Any questions from the board? Yes, we'll be right back. Okay. Mike, I'm starting with the board and then I'll go to the public. Thank you. None from us? Okay, I'll turn it over to the public. Tom, did you have your hand up? And do you want to just come up? Thank you.
I've always been slightly confused by the use of executive session. There's been a lot of them. I know the labor relations discussion's been going on for about a year or so. Now, why would this one be under executive session? Just round figure here.
It's a discussion of the contract involving real estate. That's a clear matter of executive session under the law.
The real estate that you would be selling to the developer.
Correct.
We know there's one.
We know our purchase price.
Okay.
Are other folks who have questions?
Elizabeth Brown, Waterbury. So, question to the select board is, are you aware of the decision that Manchester just made around the 40-unit development project they were also considering with floodplain?
Feel free. So that's-
Okay, there was a number of articles that came out last week where Manchester had been considering building affordable housing in the floodplain. They worked with the developer. They moved the project over by the airport to a more suitable place, and they are now preserving the area in the floodplain for the safety of the town. So I was very concerned when I shouldn't say concerned, I was relieved when I saw that decision, and I was wondering why we're able to pursue this pre-development agreement, which is taking time and potentially money from the town. And we continue to pursue building in the floodplain when we essentially articulated in our town plan as well as in the flood hazard plan that we would not do that. And now we're seeing decisions made elsewhere in the state where they are choosing not to do that, but to do their town. So my ask of the select board is that as you continue these discussions in executive session, which we are not privy to, that when you do come to us with that decision, that you articulate why you're pursuing this when others across the state are not. The state also just moved town garages out of Berlin. For that same reason. They're pursuing moving those out of the floodplain and restoring the floodplain.
Any questions, Chris?
Everybody. Just a couple of concerns. I understand from what the governor has put out there just recently that state are looking at a possible talks. Of course, fortunately or unfortunately, how you look at it, that's that voted down. That sent a message. It's so difficult, we struggle with these conversations about the cost of the house. In my opinion. That's the difficult part. A friend of ours that's building a place just outside of Waterbury here, just starting it, and he's my son's age. I'm not sure they're prepared for the aftermath of getting onto the park. It's going to be, and it's the policies that our state has dragged us into that continue to take money out of our pockets for so many different things that are really tightening the screws on our ability to build housing for ourselves. I think it's going to boil down to the state and towns to really look at prioritizing and really what they can do, what they can get by with, try to allow more people so that they can receive these potential housing deals for themselves.
Thanks, Chris.
For everyone, and I know I'm the worst offender, we did get a note that the audio is lousy online, so I'll try to be good. Everyone should try to be good. Alyssa can remind me to go over.
I'll take the license and use it as I can. Hi, Tori, welcome. Hope your travel is going okay. We're currently on public questions on Stanley Wasson. Does anyone else have questions for her? Right?
Just want to respond to Elizabeth Brown's questions. As much as I do understand what her concerns are, I too get concerned over building in the floodplain, but sometimes building in the floodplain is just unavoidable. If you look at like a project like what Down Street did, where the bus station is in Montpelier, that's right in Montpelier's floodplain. And if you build smart, you can build in the floodplain. And I think that's part of the directive where our RFQ is that what we're looking at is to have something that you could have flood resilience, but yet create housing. And I think that's, our town, I don't think anyone in this room will deny the fact that our town needs additional housing, and especially affordable housing. Not to mention, I think all levels, market rate housing, et cetera. But I do think that there are limited sites that you could build large housing complexes that will help the needs of our community. And I'm not even talking about taxes. I'm concerned about housing individuals. And if we do it in a floodplain smart way, it can be done. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this? Seeing none, then I'll move us to our next agenda item, which is to consider select board appointments. The first one is for ethics officer. I know we have a letter and a resume, and I believe Amy is here if you'd like to come up. Thank you. I don't know, can you just give a background on this position and how it came to be and how it's shown up in Waterbury over the past year?
Yes, so the,
And speak up, because Tori's online, thank you.
so an ethics law was passed by the state of Vermont that applied to municipal elected and appointed officials. And since the advent of that law, the town has had several ethics complaints that have come in where the law has been cited. The town has also had several complaints related to its own conflict of interest policy. And there was no one to be the ethics officer, which is a required designation by law. So I volunteered because I thought that was appropriate as the manager to volunteer to do it when there's no one immediately available. But I've been hoping to have someone to fill that role. So this job, and I also think from a logical perspective, it doesn't make sense for the manager to necessarily be that person, because some of the complaints would logically be about the select board or the manager. Since I am appointed and they're obviously elected, and so we thought having a third party to do that made more sense. People have asked me in conversation and suggested the select board shouldn't be the appointing authority for this person, but that's how it works. There's no other way under the law right now for anyone but the select board to appoint this person. No matter what, they are in the select board's chain of authority. Given that as background, I put this out on our website and advertised it in Front Porch Forum. And Ingrid responded. We had a couple of long conversations about this and the possibilities that go with it. I shared with her some of the work I have done in the past related to this, give her a flavor for the potential of complaints and how I've responded. Just so she understood with eyes open what might go into this position. And I thought we had some good conversations, and given her background, I was really thrilled that she's interested in doing this.
Thank you very much. We have your letter, and I think the board has copies of your resume. I guess, do you have anything you want to add or elaborate on your interest in the position or willingness?
No, I struck my, caught my attention and it posted, the structure of it works well. It's something that I feel, I certainly haven't been an ethics officer in any other capacity, but my work as a police investigator and as a licensed investigator since my retirement has focused on looking at allegations of conduct violations, policy violations, and certainly before criminal allegations. And most of my time is spent so with, you know,
Yes, speak up.
a lot of background with interviewing, investigation, and all the components that go along with putting together an impartial case. My sense is that these won't be as in-depth, but it's still important as part of, really important part of community trust. It's important to have people who step up to sort of help promote accountability and receive complaints and do a thorough job. And I think that's what you're asking for in this position. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Does anyone have questions on the board? Roger?
Ingrid, do you think that our ethics policy needs to be revised?
I don't think I could weigh in on that yet without really delving into it. And I want to take the online, you know, the Ethics Commission offers training online. I want to take that 45-minute class and just sort of sit with it. I don't feel like I can weigh in on the revised yet. But
Other questions from the board?
I know most of your career has been policing. Do you have any background in employee kind of relations? You know, I know policing, you may have some things, but other than, you know, more strict, you know, employee law and stuff like that.
So my background is internal investigations within the state police involves allegations of employee-related misconduct.
Right.
So there's that, and then since retirement, I do work with various attorneys or any institution that would like a workplace investigation where we're taking a look at improper conduct in the workplace. It doesn't have to do with crime at all, but just more sort of some people refer to them as HR kinds of complaints. So I have done some of those since retirement. Certainly not as many as misconduct, but
That's exactly what I was going.
okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks in the board? Roger?
Seeing as we have one candidate who has applied, who's really qualified, I would move to appoint Ingrid Jonas as our new ethics officer.
I second that.
Motion by Roger, second by Mike. Any discussion or questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And a thumbs up from Tori. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you very much for serving. We really appreciate it and are happy to have you.
Congratulations.
Good luck, Ingrid.
And Tom will, I presume, update the information on the website to reflect this and get Ingrid an email or anything else she needs to do her job. Excellent. Next up, also under select board appointments, we have housing task force member, and Sandy Saban applied to be a member of the housing task force. Hi Sandy, I know we have a committee application from you, but I don't know, we generally ask folks to talk about why they're interested in serving, if you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind.
Well, I actually attend a lot of the housing task force meetings because there's a lot of information there, and I feel like there are some there is some knowledge that I'm able to share. I actually really enjoy it. I have quite a background in different aspects of housing, and I know there's a lot of work that Waterbury has to do, and I also participated in ADU workshops as one of the presenters, and I figured joining it would be a good idea, so I can be a part of it as well.
Thank you very much. The folks have questions, Roger?
Sandy, what do you think can be done to further encourage more development of more ADUs within the housing task force?
Well, I think that there's not a real clear understanding of what they are. And I was thinking about this when we had our last meeting. I agree, that was great. I was thinking about when I actually took one of the postcards at the Waterbury Center post office, and I got to thinking until I applied to put in an ADU, I didn't know what ADU stood for, and that's what our highlight is on everything, and I feel like that needs to be explained. I mean, I was always a mother-in-law apartment, and an ADU, no clue, and I feel like there's not enough information out there for people to understand what possibilities are. And with a lot of elderly people in Waterbury that want to stay in their homes, I think it's something that is something to look at. It is hard because, I mean, I went through the state program and it was $50,000, and when you get into doing what you have to do, $50,000 does not really doesn't really do much. And I think unless you have very little to do, it's gonna be difficult to find people that are willing to put it in for the 20,000 or 30,000 that we're offering. Because people do take advantage of it. But that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Sandy, I know you sat in on a lot of the housing task force meetings, and in your resume, most of the things seem to be geared to more single or small unit, type projects.
Mhm.
What is your background and understanding of more larger multifamily housing projects?
I don't really have a background in it other than living in an apartment building. I think I did help, we had 2 condos together and we had to deal with multiple tenants in that case. And, as far as maintaining them on the landlord side. But I know right now that there's a definite issue with not having enough available, but also right now the cost of everything is nearly impossible to do it. With federal funding coming back, it's making it worse. So as far as, other than that kind of knowledge, I don't know.
Okay.
Cindy, you've been pretty vocally approving of the Waterbury Housing Improvement Program and how it's come together. Judging by your letter, I can tell that you think that there's a need for it. Would you plan on personally applying for this, or has your AD been finished?
Well, I actually went through the state program, so I can't apply for the local one. Had I had a choice, I would have rather taken the 30,000 that the Waterbury offered rather than the 50,000 because of I'm locked in for 10 years. And while it would be great that there's a lower income rental out there, it's very difficult on me, and there's no way I'm gonna make up the 50,000. I'm not gonna, what I'm losing in the 10 years is gonna be a lot more than 50,000. And the Waterbury program is better because it gives you 110% rather than 100% of the HUD housing. Not that 10% really gives you that much more. But it also locks you in for only 5 years. I mean, I probably won't even make it to the 10 years that I have to wait for this to come off of my title. So, but I do agree that it is something that people should.
One more question. I know this is a relatively short-term commitment, but are you planning on resubmitting for a longer-term commitment to the housing task force? Is that your goal?
I might. I just, I knew there was an opening and, like I said, I go to the meetings anyway, so, whether I'm online or in person, there's a lot I've learned there, and I feel like I give a lot, even if I'm in the audience, so, even if I don't apply again, I will still go.
With numbers provided to us, of course, showing that 50% of renters and 30% of homeowners are cost burdened by the cost of housing in Waterbury. Do you believe that there is something that we need to be looking at that we're not to solve that problem?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of things that we're looking at that we're not, and I feel like the way things are now, there probably is a lot more research that needs to be had. I feel like some of the numbers that we have, maybe we need to dig into a little bit more, just like the local registry. I feel like there's a lot more that we have to go into looking at what that change is. Working in Stowe, I'm very much in the middle of what's going on with the short-term rental issues that they're having there and the policies that they're putting into place and the potential for what can happen with different aspects of that, and I think that's gonna change a lot of things in our housing.
Other questions or comments for Sam? All right, it looks like I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Again, I think we've got a qualified interested candidate, and I would move to appoint Sandy Saban as a member of the Housing Task Force.
Second.
We have a motion by Roger, a second by Kane. Was that for the remaining term ending in 2026? What Sandy
Yes.
said on our application. Any further discussion or questions on this? I'm on the Housing Task Force, so I won't vote on this one. I'll recuse myself. Any other questions? Great. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Lapse from Tori, and I'm abstaining. All right, congratulations, Sandy. Thank you very much. That wraps up select board appointments. So we are now on to our next agenda item, which is emphasis on preliminary 2026 budget review and discussion. I guess the opening remarks I would offer is that, again, this is one of multiple conversations as we talked about in our last meeting. And as you see at the bottom of the agenda, we are doing a long meeting on Sunday, December 7th. We have our regular meeting on December 15th. Potential for other meetings in December as well to work through the budget. We are going to have a budget adjustment day akin to what we did last year, which is just saying we want to have a full draft of the budget available by January 10th, which is a Saturday for folks to review and weigh in on. That is prior to when we as the select board need to warn it for public meetings. So in addition to obviously the standard town meeting day process when folks could offer changes to the budget, there's also that earlier opportunity for us to give background on what's in the budget and weigh in. So I just wanted to offer that as some context setting. But then I believe we have a couple of specific items for review tonight. So I will turn it over to you, Tom.
I'll do my best to speak up. I wanted to start with some ideas, not proposals, ideas for the local option tax. At this stage, and I first just want to review the history a little bit. So in 2025, adopted budget had $627,500 in expenses funded for the local option tax. At this stage, my prediction is we'll get about 900 grand in this year. I always try to be a little cautious in the prediction, but we're on pace for that. And in the fourth quarter of the year, our take goes up a little bit because the state law changed. So we no longer keep 70 cents on the dollar of all the local spending at 75 cents. The extra 5 cents is pretty meaningful over the long term. So we'll finish the year with a pretty substantial amount of the long term that we've collected above and beyond we spent. Something that isn't here would require a 2025 select board approval if it was not budgeted. I know the sensitivities around spending local option tax dollars that are not budgeted. But I think this one is worthy of some consideration and would have public support. The town has in 2026 and 2027 two debt payments to make for a fire vehicle. Those are debt payments that we make to our tax stabilization fund, so we pay ourselves. So if the town wanted to spend $65,000 this year, and it would have to be made in this year's budget before the end of the year, we're cutting out $32,500 from next year's spending, which is a penny on the tax rate. Sorry, yeah, a penny on the tax rate is about $85,000. So 32 is not half a penny, but it could be meaningful in the long term. So I just wanted to note that's an option that could be discussed. You may think it's not enough to consider, but I wanted to point that out.
And sorry, just to orient folks, we're on the 2026 tax ideas, and is that line 28, or am I not?
That's
following
line
you?
28, that's correct. I think this one makes sense on some levels because we're paying ourselves. Most of the town's debt is fixed through the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, and you can pay that early, but you actually don't save when you sign that agreement. You've agreed to pay the interest over the long term, so prepayments don't save you a nickel. We have some other debt for a public works truck through a local bank, but there's still a balance of about $120,000, and there's 4 years left. So paying that $120 only buys you about $30,000 reduction in the budget. So spend a fair amount now to get less relief next year. But if we pay off this fire truck, it's essentially a 2-to-1 ratio. We spend 65, we save half of that next year. So I think it's worthy of some discussion and consideration.
I'm pausing for a second, Tom, just to say, there was a question about screen sharing. Screen sharing, Excel, we can try. The Zoom is not great. These are posted under related files for this meeting. We're in LOT ideas, as I stated, so folks can get that on the town website if you're at home on Zoom.
Give me a second here.
Because we can screen share, but it's gonna be really small in experience.
How do I do that? Go back. So I just wanted to give that as background and thinking about some 2026 ideas. At this time last year, and I'm on line 4 on the big spreadsheet. This time last year, I put forth a roughly 3-year plan about, and that included 3 years of spending on gravel roads. And the plan was $150,000 in 2025, then go way down next year and give us some time to catch up. And I don't think we need it. And I think the money we spent this year is pretty well spent. Between the gravel we bought, the blacktop that came off of Newland Flats that we repurposed, mostly on Perry Hill. I'm really hoping mud season, especially on Perry Hill Road, others too, but Perry Hill was a big focus. It's going to be dramatically different. I think we put 7,000 yards of material into that road. So it should be dramatically better. We put a lot of material into the curve of Newland and Ripley. I think it's working, and I don't see the reason to not do it. It may mean that in every year we do some hauling ourselves, some with contractors. But I think if we have the budget and the overall run, let's keep it up. I don't see the need to go backwards and hit the pause button. Line 5, the new fire truck, that was purchased, that was approved last year as part of the 3-year plan. So that's money you have to budget. Because you're gonna spend, you've already bought the truck. Highway capital fund, for years, the town had a big negative fund balance in its highway capital fund, and it's been improved dramatically from negative $600,000 to an amount far below the top of my head, about $150,000, but it's still in the red. We want to bring that fund slowly but surely into the positive. So there's some future date we can say, hey, we've got a balance there. Let's go ahead and spend that balance at times. It's always important to have some emergency there. So I recommend that we keep contributing to that fund and just keep running a surplus in that fund to fix that balance over time. 2020, going down to line 7, in 2025, we spent some money on recreational facility planning and estimating. I don't have a proposal or a number for 2026 yet, but I want to talk about that later at the bottom of the spreadsheet. It's a pretty big number and conversation. So I don't have a formal number yet, but I want to have a conversation and start to take the pulse of the board a little bit. Let me just go through the overview first. Going down to line 8, the public works vehicle, that was already voter approved, so you're on year 2. Going down to line 9 of the housing trust fund, conversations with Joe Camerata in particular, between the money allocated in prior years and the money allocated this year, there's $175,000. And the ADU program is just beginning. The What I've heard initially from Down Street is that there was perhaps less demand for the state ADU program than in prior years. And our program piggybacks off of that. The state program is now closed, but my perception, and this is my perception, and I don't have a crystal ball and I could be dead wrong, but my perception is perhaps it's a wise time to hit the pause button and let's let that program play out for a year and see how fast the takers are and see how fast that money goes out the door. My suspicion is if someone applies to Down Street today for that money, it's quite a long process to get it. Perhaps 12 months would not shock me. Sandy could comment on that, I'm sure. So I think if you've got 5 or 6 applicants, you've got that money available for some time. And again, this is just Tom likes my thought process. It's your budget and it's town people's budget. So that's just my preliminary thoughts on that. Going down to the pool, line 11 is a big line item. And that is the high-end quote. I'm going to work with Public Works to try to fine-tune that and hopefully reduce it. No promises it will be reduced substantially. This spring, we did pay a pretty substantial amount of money, around $50,000 at the shallow end of the pool relined with essentially a really thick plastic / resin. The water loss at the pool, which we measure every year, was reduced because of that pretty substantially. We had better control of the algae. It was not perfect, but better. And the working theory is that the old liner simply got old and more porous over time. And, there were these little micro abrasions and it was just hard for the algae it's hard for us to get rid of the algae. We also have lower chlorine levels in the shallow end. And some of that is a function of the filter. And the thought is to keep investing in the pool to keep it viable. So the 150 would buy us a modern filter system that is fully automated. And so pool staff don't have to worry about whether or not they shut off the chlorine pump. We don't have to worry about testing for chlorine levels when we open the pool on a Monday because it's all automated. We'll go to your cell phone and we know if there's a problem. And we hope with this new system that we have, again, better luck controlling the algae, which has been a major challenge in prior years, I think, for a long, long time. The pool filter is also really old, many decades old. I've been told by Public Works that no parts are available for it. They don't make the model anymore, but no, it's hoses and pumps and pipes, and generally speaking, if something goes wrong, they can jerry rig it to figure it out. But it's not a great way to run a pool. And it'd be nice to have a modern system, and so that's the general background for that number. Hoping to work with Public Works and fine tune that and lower it. Going to line 13, the chair of the tree board is in the audience, presented with a request for some funding. And part of that was an increase in ongoing operational funding to plant trees, trim trees, deal with some challenging trees in the community. And that's operational cost. And so if the select board wishes to put that in the budget, that should be in the operational budget because that's consistent with the local action tax policy, which is we're not funding operations. But they also requested money to conduct a tree inventory, which has been on their wish list for a long, long time. And that's really a one-time expense. And so my thought process was if the select board thinks that's worthy, that the local option tax would be a good way to pay for a one-time expense. So I'm using that number of $8,500 for now. Line 14 is what I'm calling the fire command vehicle. Some people call it the chief's vehicle. It's the long bed F-350 we have as a response vehicle. It's a little over 20 years old. Doesn't have a lot of miles. None of our fire vehicles get a lot of miles, and they're well taken care of. But it's an old vehicle, starting to have some mechanical problems. And it was never exactly the vehicle they wanted. There's a long story behind that, but it's really a big boat of a vehicle. And for fighting fires, particularly on gravel roads at night, some of the back roads and driveways, they want something smaller. So that number is 105 as a placeholder. I think we can work that down a little bit. But it's not going to be 75 by the next meeting. It might be 100 or 95. And then a similar vehicle for public works as part of their replacement schedule. There's an older F-350 that's an everything truck. That's a little cheaper. There's non-fire apparatus on it, obviously, and we have an existing plow that we will transfer. So 90 is, I think, a really accurate number for that. We're going to try to fine tune that. The good news is it's not a vehicle that we need to wait for and order and wait a year and a half for a chassis. That's a little bit more of an over the counter. Not entirely, but more so. And then the really, really fun one, line 16. Background, I expect to hear this week about our CDBG DR application, so Community Development Block Grant Disaster Release Application. We applied back in September for 4.25 million for Random Meadow, and that would be to do the project in full. Hang on, I've got someone in the room. And since then, we've continued to chase whatever funding is out there, and there's a slug of funding available that we call QUIS funding, Clean Water Service Provider. Clean Water Service Provider funding is funding that's administered by Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, and it is given to projects that essentially reduce the phosphorus flowing into the river and Lake Champlain. And I've delved into this a little bit, begun to understand it better, and the funding for the projects and the phosphorus credit don't pertain to the removal of soil. I had initially thought that removing soil laden with phosphorus, that's where the credit arises. It does not. It pertains to the fact that you're removing soil and you're creating additional floodway where future phosphorus would be deposited. And in talking to Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, they have funded projects in the past that were at the planning stages. But when those projects made it to the construction phase, the final design was different than the project they funded. And so they didn't get the full credit in phosphorus. And so they are reluctant to fund future projects for that reason. They have signaled to us that on paper, based on very preliminary design, that we have a great project and there could be $1 million in grant funding available here. But it sounds like it's a real shoe-in, it's a real home run if we advance Random Meadow to that final design phase. So I'm really hoping tomorrow my cell phone buzzes and someone says, I got you $4.25 million for Random Meadow. Go forth and conquer. But the thought we've had internally from the staff perspective and in working with Dana Allen, who does consulting work, is if we can advance this to the final design stages, it gets us in an excellent position to receive the QUIS funding and have a really competitive application. But this also gets us in a position to bid it with or without grant funding. So this funding gets us completely to the end. So if there is a future bond vote, we will have really, really good formal numbers where we're not speculating about where the fill might go, but we have contractors who are stating where the fill, we have agreements in place about where the fill will go. We have contractors placing bids based on that. So we have less of a speculative number around the project. So this really advances us to that final stage. Part of this conversation is that if the community doesn't want to fund Randall Meadow, don't fund the preliminary design, don't fund the design and engineering. It doesn't make any fundamental sense. So it's a big slug of cash. The proposal in front of you pays for it in 1 year with the local option tax because there is sufficient funding there. It is certainly possible to say, hey, we want to do this, but we want to pay for it over a longer term. therefore allowing other projects to move forward on this list or for you to add projects on the list. Again, Tom likes his proposals, not proposals. To consider a lot of different ways to bite the apple here, and I understand it's a lot of money proposed for 1 year. But my thought process was, if we can put this behind us and put the town in a better position to move the project forward, perhaps it's time that we've been trying to advance this for quite some time. And maybe we just gotta put some cash behind it. Number 17 is another big idea and big concept, not as weighty in terms of funding. In talking with Lieutenant Howard of the Vermont State Police about our contract, talked about the potential of modifying the state police contract as a pilot, as part of a pilot. So one option I've considered and had internal conversations about is, could Waterbury reduce its state police contract and have one trooper and take those funds and put those towards a contract with the county sheriff or some other entity? Right now, there is no other entity to contract with. Other local police forces and towns have not expressed any interest. That could change in the future, and I'm actually hopeful that it will. And asking the county sheriff, even with a pretty substantial lead time, to give us what amounts to $240,000 of coverage is beyond the capabilities of the sheriff's office, given their staff. The other realistic piece is the state police contract in Waterbury is a special detail, and it would create a real administrative headache for them to go down to one trooper. And then there's a realistic thesis, which is that the state police are really, really short. Central Vermont, the Berlin Barracks, they got up to better staffing this summer. Berlin and other places are now made a little short again because they're providing some additional coverage to the city of Burlington. They've been short for a long, long time, as have all the local forces. And a real concern is that even if there was an agreement that we reduce the presence by one trooper for whatever period of time, 6 months, 1 year, I'm not sure there will be a trooper at that later date to come back. And so I've thought a lot and talked a lot with Lieutenant Howard about potentially modifying that contract. And I think this is a situation where if you break it, you bought it. I think it's awfully risky given their staffing issues, but I did beat down that issue a little bit. But the sheriff is available. And so the sheriff can come at a future date and present. He did present before. And the proposal I put in front of you was $75,000 that would begin in July and end in March. So it's 9 months. The sheriff rates are a little bit variable because they charge an hourly rate, but then they also charge mileage. And the mileage is, of course, the variable piece. They do work hard to limit it. So if he's got a sheriff's deputy nearby, they'll try to schedule shifts. So if someone's half-time in Duxbury, they'll come to Waterbury for the other half. The beauty of the sheriff's contract is you only get hours where they're actually here. So that's different from the state police contract, where if they're out sick, you're still paying for that coverage. In rough numbers, I would expect after mileage of sheriff's work to be a little over 100 an hour, probably 110. So $75,000. Roughly divide that number by 100, and that's your coverage. That's your total hours you would get. So call it 700 hours over 9 months. It's not a dramatic amount per month, but it's something to consider because the sheriff is available. I know like the rest of you, we've had some of those persistent and consistent complaints about speeding. And that's something they'd be happy to focus on. So just a thought about that moving forward.
After your breaking you by it speech, is this 75 on top of our existing state police contract?
Yes. So you're currently spending $477K.
So we're looking at over $500,000 police.
And I'm sure the sheriff would be happy to do a lesser amount. I'm not sure to what extent he could do a greater amount. We've talked in the past about something like 1 FTE, and he said that would be a challenge. But this proposal would be addition as essentially a test pilot program, so the voters in 2027 could say yes or no.
Yeah, let me make sure there's no one else from the board. I guess my other question, Tom, is to me, is this something that winds up in not LOT? I guess I would have a short question, but that's.
And I'm not proposing a form. If you support this and want to bring it to the voters, I'm not proposing the form in which you do that. I'm not suggesting it's embedded in the budget. I'm not suggesting it's on the warning, it's its own item. I'm suggesting that's a future item of conversation.
Yeah, I guess one of the follow-up for that is how many potential hours of policing total if if there's contracts combined, what total hours of policing?
You've got 2 FTEs with the state police. In reality, and that's 2,080 hours in a year, so 4,160 hours. In reality, with time off, you've got about 75–80% of that in policing. So you've got around 3,000 policing hours. So if you have another 700 through the sheriff, you're roughly getting 25% to that total of actual boots on the ground policing hours. I will say one benefit we have, and I've actually heard this from people, it's a great side benefit, but one of our troopers lives in Waterbury and parks his car sometimes in a pretty visible spot. So I think there's some thought that there's always out there doing.
I got pulled over by Washington County the other day, and Waterbury taxpayers didn't even have to pay for it.
Give Tom's voice a break. Sandy, I think you had a question, and do you want to come up?
Just a quick one. I think that I actually brought this up at town meeting as a potential adding for local options tax last year, and it was beaten down. And I only said 50,000. So just so you know, that 40 was not a big. It wasn't a big hit.
Well, I thought it was a good idea. Line 18 is a smaller amount, but I want to talk about this for a few minutes. So the town uses an information system called NEMRIC that virtually every Vermont municipality uses. It's 1980 software, and it's a Microsoft product that's no longer supported by Microsoft, which may mean nothing in 10 years, but it may mean that one of those Windows updates you get, which are all for security, means it's not compatible. And that's something that our IT vendor and I worry about, our IT consultant, meaning Bob Butler. And so I would like to transition away from NEMRIC for payroll. Number of things have to fall into place to make that happen. Modern payroll system, again, they would have an additional expense, an additional operating expense that would be in the operating budget that you'll see in about a week. But there's transitional cost of about $10,000, $15,000, I should say. And that's just because in year one, there's an awful lot of custom coding that has to be done to go into a modern system. And there's a lot of vendors that are in this business, a couple really big national vendors. From a staff perspective, it also makes payroll dramatically easier because all the modern systems come with time clocks. And so the time clocks feed into the system. There's no timesheets like we fill out now, not really a manual process. Yes, the electronic time clocks have to be reviewed by department heads. And yes, the system might not automatically know that, hey, this person had a call in, so those 3 hours were a special pay type at a higher rate. There are always those adjustments to be made. But in general, it's far more plug and play. And so for the person overseeing payroll, it's an awful lot less labor once you transition. You're mostly certifying the hours, but the payroll company from there does everything. So the modern payroll companies pay employees, pay the IRS, pay the state of Vermont for taxes and other fees. All that goes through that. And so from our perspective, makes our lives a lot easier for the long term and makes the labor side of it easier. And also from a business continuity perspective, once you transition, it's pretty darn easy to get payroll done. It's always a worry when you've got one primary person trained on such a critical thing. If you've got everything feeding into the system and you're really approving hours, it's easier. And so to me, it's a pretty mission critical business function that I really want to move on. So the great irony of this list of over $1 million is I think this is the most important, because if we're not making payroll, we're in trouble. There's also an accounts payable system, number of systems I'd like to consider moving to. Again, it moves that process into the cloud, so select board members could sign off on the warrants in the cloud. But from a vendor perspective, any invoice can simply be emailed directly into a modern system. And then we set that system up so that the appropriate people get those invoices and approve them. And it's all got pretty smart software with AI behind it. So once the system sees an invoice a few times, it knows how to code it because it's done it before. So it's a pretty good labor saving possibility. And then from the public perspective, if you say, Tom, I want to see what the town is spending on XYZ, I say, go to the website. Log in. You can search by vendor name, you can search by amount, you can do all sorts of searching and sorting and downloading. So it's a great way to be uber transparent in terms of how we pay our bills.
As this, sorry, I think we're all a little sick. As this line item screams general fund to me, and I like your note that says consistent with lot policy, what bucket does this fall into?
There's that final section of the policy about efficiencies in town government. And that's what I believe it falls into. Again, I'm proposing that the general fund budget you'll see soon would have some costs embedded in it for the that will be there forever. But this would just be the one-time transition costs that are higher in year one with the new software.
I think, assume that's Cheryl Bloor online. Cheryl, do you have a question?
Or evening, yes, thank you. So as a taxpayer, my concern is when you're buying new software, the life cycle cost that goes into this, as we know that once you buy something, it's most often proprietary, and you have to continually pay licensing fees to maintain the software that you've bought. So when you are looking at quotes or vendors for this, it doesn't necessarily need to be the highest or the best. I guess, have you taken that into account, the life cycle cost of buying this software? And you estimated what that might be?
Yes, generally speaking, the vendors I've met with so far, the fees are really tied to your checks. Every employee, every pay cycle. There's a cost per check is the way to think of it. So that's in the range of $10,000 annually for the town. With your ongoing annual fee. Is it going to go up a little bit every year? I'm sure it will. But that's a valid point.
Thank you.
Looks like Sandy has another.
I just wondered, working in Emmerich, first of all, is there really an issue with the current payroll system, or possibly not set up? There's issues with the setup, and also with time clocks, I do agree that that should be something considered. And I understand that it doesn't integrate with Nemrick, but there are options to integrate what is using the time clock software. We just recently moved to time clocks and hours. It works great, and but we aren't. My concern would also be this outside payroll service integrating with Nemrick. So would this all be manual entries, and how much more time does that add?
So I think what you're referring to is how does the accounting side of Nemrick integrate with payroll?
And accounts payable too.
Yeah, so there'd have to be the payroll system would have to, at the end of it, spit out a journal entry that would have to go into Nemrick. And then we have to, as part of the transition, work with Nemrick and pay them a little bit of money so that that journal entry can just be imported directly, and we're not typing in, 40 entries to make sure it's correct. That's the big.
Yeah,
that's the big
I'm gonna
plan.
encourage us, I appreciate the points raised by both. For tonight, given that it's preliminary, I am noting both of these life cycle costs and the integration, and wanting to give Tom the idea to share the ideas, and note that these will all be part of the consideration. Thank you.
Line 19, I want to rename. I want to call that Stanley Watson, Woody Avenue, and FEMA. And I'll give you an example of part of what the towns run into with projects as we advance them. Sorry, can you go further? Stanley Watson, Woody Avenue, FEMA, Random Meadows above, is that part of what we've run into is that as we've advanced these projects, there's been unavoidable costs that have been hard to plan for. And a simple example was that for Randall Meadow, great, public notice, there's 60 some $1 million available through CDBG DR applications. You delve into that, it's a great opportunity to get some funding for Randall Meadow and Woody Avenue. We learned very quickly along the way that you have to do a phase 1 environmental assessment as part of that. So the option is to pay for the phase 1, not necessarily budgeted or planned, or not apply for the grants. So you pay for the phase 1. Those are not free. With the FEMA projects, there's been a series of roadblocks, some big, some not big. The best example I can give pertains to 33 and 35 North Main. I've noted before in public meetings, there's a program called the Umbrella Program, which would insulate the town from some of the liability associated with brownfields there. There's an application fee associated with that program, which the town has paid. That application has not been accepted because the deeds for those properties don't have meets and bounds. They don't have an accurate property description. And Karen and Beth have gone back and researched deeds from the beginning of time. There's also no survey on file, and the owners don't have one. So to get a survey for those properties is about $4,000 per property. And I'm trying to work that out between the state of Vermont and the property owners. And that's a real challenge. It is a FEMA eligible expense, but FEMA has indicated they are not paying for it, plain and simple. So someone's going to have to pay an $8,000 bill for those properties to become part of a FEMA buyout. I'm not sure it's an appropriate thing for the taxpayers of this town to pay $8,000 to lose their grand list. So I'm trying to figure that out and have the property owners pay for it. But during this FEMA process, we've run into roadblocks and expenses that were not anticipated. And I'm not sure that, I'll go Don Rumsfeld on you. I'm not sure we're past all the unknown unknowns there. And so I think having some money for those projects and these development projects to help advance this would be useful. And for Stanley Watson, I have noted that I think there's going to be some potential need for the town to hire consultants to help advance this, not from the developer's perspective, but from our perspective, that we might have some questions and have some expertise and have some pushback here. Not from the public, but from ourselves. The town might want to hire its own experts in certain areas. So I think having some funding available for these projects and processes is going to be necessary. Not just useful, but likely necessary. And then the very bottom, going down to line 36, or some ideas that are not in here. But I wanted to make note of these to some extent as a preview and to some extent to get an understanding of if any of these you think should be raised for consideration. But the rec center is a big number. We spent $17,500 this year to have some sketch plans and drawings, which are now done. And in very rough numbers, forecast to be $8 to $10 million to build a rec center that's in the range of 16 to 17,000 square feet in Anderson Field. You finance that over 20 years, you've got $700K in debt service for 20 years. If you finance it over 30, you've got less. So I gave you the two extremes, which is $8 million over 30 years versus $10 million over 20. But nonetheless,
Is this 450K a year in debt service?
yes. So really big numbers. What I'm trying to do now over the next few weeks is to work with the architect we hired to say a couple of things. To say the first that this is a huge expense, and as I noted with Randall Meadow, we're not at the bid phase. And so is there a way, without spending 10% of the 8 to 10 million in engineering, is there a way to advance the project so that we could come to the voters in a year with really good information about what it would cost, and not sketch plans, not maybe fully engineered plans, but we could have good detailed plans with a really good understanding of the final cost. So if there is a bond vote, we have better information. We're not putting something out for a bond vote, opening the bids 3 months later and saying, oh, we've got a problem that's solved. So I'm hoping to have some numbers for you related to that in the next few weeks, but even that's going to be a 6-figure number. So we haven't had much conversation about this yet, but I just wanted to start to shine a light on this a little bit.
My biggest concern outside of just the estimated price tag in general is that this is in option tax ideas, which means even with the $8 million option, Tom, you've wiped half of the local option tax off the table with debt service alone.
That's why it's at the bottom there. And it could be, forget the rec center, assume for a moment there's a project in front of the town where there's a big slug of future debt on the books. In that scenario, what I suggest you think about is using the local option tax to phase it in, so you're not having a big increase in taxes, but perhaps you do it over 3 years. So at some point, it's just in the general fund budget, but you're just not doing a massive increase in 1 year. Line 37 is an idea I just wanted to present, again, as a proposal, not at all a proposal. Bill Woodruff has the traffic count data, but not a shock to say that Perry Hill is our most heavily traveled gravel road. We've put an awful lot of material into it this year, and I think we'll see that come spring. But there's been chatter from the public over the years with me. There's been some internal chatter, and the thought has been that, is it time to have a conversation about paving Perry Hill? It's partially paved, but to perhaps over the course of several years, pave it all the way. I'm not sure the residents would like that. I've talked to a number of folks in Perry Hill who say, keep it gravel. The minute you pave it, it's going to be really fast and we'll have more speeding problems. I've talked to more folks who said, pave it. We'd love to see it paved, get rid of the gravel, and then let's see some issues. I don't know where the public would fall overall. But we're a growing town. I think it's pretty widely used as a way around 100, which is increasingly congested, and that's not likely to change. And so I just think it's worthy of a little future consideration and conversation about perhaps paving that road. I'm not suggesting that we have a 20-year plan to pave every road, but I think Perry Hill is a little bit of a special case. Feel free to tell me I'm entirely wrong, and I won't argue.
I think residents who live on Berry Hill, whether they want their road paved.
So I think we've in general talked about a paving plan in general, and I think recognizing we're looking at all of this out of context.
Yeah,
But to me, it's a question of needs for all of the roads in town long term and how that may or may not fit in.
And then for sidewalks, Bill Woodruff has done some yeoman's work on some of the worst sections of sidewalks. And there's a wide range of costs there, and that's because the low end assumes that the town does a lot of their work, particularly the removal and the cleanup. And the high end, you should contract it all out. So pretty big numbers would not have to be done all at once. And my thought on high street sidewalks is that there's a potential visioning project coming up and a capital project and housing project regarding High Street, regarding Woody Avenue. And then perhaps High Street sidewalks could be part of that thought process about what happens in that neighborhood. But again, some larger numbers there. And then line 39, we've talked about before, and we've not received any grants for this, but that's about the mechanicals at Town Hall. They are 2 feet above the floodplain. I'm not sure how much of a flood risk they really are. We still had 2 full feet of clearance in all the floods, but nonetheless, it strikes me as a potential thing to consider for the future. I'm not sure if that should be moved up or not. I think it'd be a whole lot cheaper to raise a few pillars and reconnect and disconnect and reconnect some wires, but it never quite is the case. So threw a lot at you there. And again, my thought process was, part of my thought process putting it together was, if you accept this at face value, which I'm sure you won't, you still end the year with some unspent funds. But it's obviously logical to look at this and say, Randall Meadow, if we're interested in doing it, could be paid for over more than 1 year. And then there's a larger balance, potentially either items to add to this list, and certainly feel free to take away. Again, the items that can't be changed are like line 5, the fire truck, was approved by the voters in prior year, and line 8 was approved by the voters in the prior year. So aside from $253,000, the rest of this is your purview to amend, to delete, to add, all those things by 1 or 2%, some large proposals tonight, for future amendment conversation.
Thank you very much, Sean. I appreciate how much work has gone into this and that we all have lots to chew on. I'm noting it's 7:50 right now. We have this scheduled to 8:15, starting with the board. Does anyone have major follow-up questions or comments or considerations? And then we can take questions or comments from the public. Mike?
I don't want to interrupt you but on earlier issues, but the ones that I want to have some more information on line 11, the pool, the automated filter system. I know we have talked in depth about the pool, whether I know our patch, that's going to get us some more years. Is this expense going to also, in lieu of us going to, a $4 or $5 million project to replace the pool, is this going to extend the life of that resource?
No, it will not, because the issues with the pool are with the liner.
So it's just a functionality issue.
It's a functionality. That being said, the intent here is that if there's some sort of catastrophic failure of the liner and we can't hold water, which we're obviously hoping to avoid, and we don't think it's going to happen overnight, the filter could be reused. The filter is independent of the liner.
Okay, thanks. Next issue, again, this is a little bit under 13 tree inventory. I understand, to me, I look at this expense, not that I'm probably in favor of it, but I think it should be a regular budget line item versus a tax. Now, I won't say anything further about that. Randall Meadow, you kind of addressed a little bit of my concerns. I guess, as you said, I think it probably needs to go to the voters as to if this is going, if we may be looking at a huge expense. And if the voters have stomach to do that, then this expense is probably, well taken. If it's not, some sort of realization that we may be on the hook for a big dollar amount, I don't know if we should go forward. And
I guess my thinking, Mike, is if you assume for a minute this is a separate question on the warning, the question would read something like, shall the voters pay $325,000 to fully design and engineer the project, with the understanding that they'll be asked to pay much more in a future year?
Right. And again, on some of your wish list items, recreation center, I keep on saying we should get money from Ben and Jerry's Recreation Center, but I don't know if that will ever happen. I still wonder if this should be an LOP kind of expense versus, a regular capital expense, if that's something that we decide to do. I think, as you mentioned, the Perry Hill, I think it's really up in the air as to if some of the residents love to have their road paved and others like having, kind of a rural road, and especially when you get paved roads, you get the people cheating, the traffic, as well as I think the speeding is going to be a big issue. The sidewalks, I think, are a really important issue. I think that's something I think we should make up high expectations, because I know a lot of people, when it comes to, we've done the big dig and there is still some sidewalk projects that probably need to be done. So I think in terms of a local options tax, I think that's a very strategic use of local options tax money.
Okay.
Not echoing Mike's point, but Mike did bring up a idea that I was dwelling on as you were talking about the Randall Meadow engineering costs. Maybe that should move, as you said it, into its own article instead of being bulked in with the rest of the local option tax. And that's more over to illustrate its importance than as to just simply take it out of the local option tax budgeting. I think illustrating the importance of the design and engineering of that site, and the fact that we probably will be facing down more costs in years to come, really should be at the forefront of the conversation about that spending.
Tori, I can't see if you're still online and have any questions. Roger, do you have
Tori
any?
wrote a comment, and let me read it. I think for the future ideas not yet proposed, I would appreciate seeing a cost estimate to get wastewater/sewage up to the center, or at least part of it. There are a number of septic failing as a result of floods, and I think we need to start looking at how to help there too. It's not something I've worked on. Something Skip Flanders, the chair of FUD, has said consistently, is that if the town wants to develop water and sewer infrastructure and connect like any other developer, where it builds it to our specs and FUD takes it over. So certainly that's something that could be considered, and we can work on some numbers there. It's pretty aspirational, because you're talking, well over 7 figures a mile.
Roger?
With the change from the 70% to 75% of LT dollars coming into the town, doesn't that give us 945?
Trying to be conservative, maybe assuming the economy drags a little bit. I actually think we'll be over 9 this year, but I wouldn't want to over forecast.
And when would we need to make the decision on this committing to the 65,000 for the fire truck for this year?
I believe by December 31st. I could probably delay that. I mean, let me rephrase that. If we're using $65,000 to cut debt out of the budget,
Yeah.
Future debt, I would tell you 100%, if it was paid to an outside entity like a bank, it has to be by the end of the year. If it's paid to ourselves, I could probably have the accounting, I mean, the accounting would work. You'd just be bringing $65,000 onto the budget next year to a current year debt and 2027 debt. So if you want to put it in front of the voters, it would be I would argue it would have to be a standalone question because you're impacting the tax rate very directly in a different way than you are these other proposals. So you could delay it and put it on the warrant because we're paying ourselves, so there's no deadline to make that payment provided it's by the end of 2026. So if that's your thinking, I can certainly live with that. Understand the sensitivities about spending the money right now.
Other questions? I see Cheryl has a hand up online and then Kristen Miller.
Bill has kind of.
Yep.
Alyssa. So mine's very minor, but I think it's kind of important. For line 19, I know you all are calling it Woody Ave, but it actually does have a street name.
Cheryl, we're losing you a little. I can't really understand you. I
Okay,
don't know if you get closer to your mic.
so mine's pretty minor, but I think for visibility and transparency, on line 19, I would ask, instead of calling it Woody Ave, you use the actual street name so that the community that lives there is cognizant of what you guys are talking about moving forward in planning this budget. Either put Woody Ave in parentheses with the actual street name or vice versa. But I think, using Woody Ave, some people in the community might not be cognizant of the actual street that you folks are talking about.
It was formally renamed a little while back. It's a long story. I don't think anyone here at the table wants to rehash, but that is the street name. But I can call it Woody Avenue / former Armory Avenue.
I didn't realize the street changed. So that's on me. Sorry, I didn't realize the street sign had been changed.
It's still a good point, so I think you're not alone.
All right, thanks.
Chris, you're next and then Bill.
You answered my question by, I was curious as to know if that 325 for the design for in front of the public, you guessed that it probably will. If it passes, does it make sense to postpone 75,000 for the sheriff's option to put the load on that 325 expenditure? When it comes to the upgrading the payroll and warrants payments, does this software pick up mistakes? Billing? And if not, how does that get dealt with? It just goes through the system and they pay it.
So modern software, if an invoice gets emailed to the system, it can be emailed by your company if we hire you, by anyone. It can also just be given to us snail mail, and we can scan it in. But the software reads all those normal things we need to get it into our system, the vendor name and the invoice number and the dollar amounts. We still have to code it correctly for our accounting system. So the software systems with their technology, they see invoices from the same vendors and they read them. And so they can do much of that automatically. You still have to manually check it and make sure it's correct. And then it still needs all the normal department head signatures, would just be an online signature. Still needs select board approval before payment.
So the warrants will go through select board approval first.
That wouldn't change.
FEMA fit for the demolition of the buildings. You say $4,000 per survey. Roughly. What's the cost to the town if those buildings get left and the taxpayers that own them can't occupy them? They don't pay for the taxes. They go to the tax sale. Yada, yada. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a more of a bigger expense to the town than just $4,000 per survey.
Yeah, understand.
Okay. Should the 65,000 potential surplus go towards the capital fund as opposed to payments back? And the Perry Hill pave, I'm curious to know, we've been kind of band-aiding Guppo Road along, and I know Barnes Hills and desperate need. Those two would come first. Yeah, the paving project.
Yeah, I know.
We're having troubles catching up with.
In the capital plan, we talked about 2027 and 2028 was the major couple of year of that plan.
So that is in the site.
I believe Gupto is, Gupto, I believe, is over $1 million for the total cost. And the next page in the packet would be the proposed paving, which is LLT money. That's this. But and this is consistent with the capital plan for paving presented to the select board, and I can bring that up here. Did people see that online? I think. So how do I move this? So the paving plan presented to the select board for 2026 a few months back, I've been looking at, was this plan with some updated numbers and one change that I'm proposing. This will not be LOT. This is taxpayer money in the paving capital budget, in the highway capital budget. And so this would pave Barnes Hill Road from essentially the water plant to the end, which I think needs it. This would pave Park Row North and Rotarian Way, the area from the train station. It would finally get to, I know we've talked about this before, but Neyland Flats, we put a lot of good base into that curve. So we pave from where it ends on Neyland Flats to Ring Road at about $80,000 for that cost. What I'm not proposing, which was talked about before, is to pave Park Row South. And that's because if we're going to take 100,000 yards of fill out of the area nearby and use that road, we're going to need to pave it afterwards. And that might not happen tomorrow, but I feel like if we pave it next year, we're going to pave it pretty soon thereafter if we advance that project. If the voters say at town meeting day, if there's an item on the warning about spending a lot of money on Randall Meadow and the voters say no, then I think we revisit Park Row shortly thereafter. But I think it's obviously silly to do that in 2026.
Considering you suggested the town is growing, you're right, we probably are growing to some degree. You know focused on this, making sure that we grow sustainably.
And the reason I put Perry Hill on here, despite the fact that it wasn't in our capital plan a few months ago, is I just think it's worthy of conversation at this point. And perhaps people want their gravel roads to stay gravel.
The other consideration, both using sand to using salt.
Not necessarily. I'm not sure. It's pretty flat.
Calling it there, Bill Sheplak. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for all of your work to get the local option tax. I think, we're quibbling about things that a few years ago we didn't even have an opportunity to talk about. So all of you who were involved in this, I appreciate it. Just one question first, Tom. How close is the actual 2025 spending going to be to the budget? I know some things like, public works vehicle and the fire truck, those are actual expenses. Maybe the housing trust fund, 5,000. Is there anything on the 25 budget that isn't going to be close to what was budgeted?
We're moving on the card access system this month. Might not quite spend that this year, but I think otherwise, no, the planning and conservation fund, the planning and conservation money that was allocated for the consultant to assist with the town plan update. I don't know off the top of my head how much will be spent this year, but I know that contract was for just shy of $50,000.
That's
So I
good.
think we're pretty close to the penny.
It's going to be pretty close to what it's about. That's good. Thank you. The sheriff's option, I want to I think I would like to recommend that you seriously consider that. So Tom's discussion about the contract with the state police, and that, I don't even know what the total number is now, but you get 2 officers for that. Even when the village had 3 and 4 and 5 officers, we only had 1 officer on duty at any one time for the most part. Every once in a while, way back when we had things like, Sisters 2 in the pub, we put somebody on Friday nights or Saturday nights along with the regular shift. But for the past 20 years or so, before I left, we typically had 1 officer on. And the complaint from the public was always about what I called retail policing, doing traffic control, going into businesses and talking to business owners, walking through the neighborhoods. Those kind of things, when you have 1 officer on duty and they're running to take calls, go to accidents. We've got a much bigger drug problem today than we had 20 years ago. So I think the state police contract, we're getting a lot of good value for that. It's kind of under the radar. People don't see what's happening, but they're in our town and they're doing things. But it's not new that you can't get effective traffic control out of a police department or contract with state police when you have 1 officer on. So I think the only way you're going to be able to address speeding is to have a separate contract with somebody, whether it's another police department or the sheriff's department. But I don't think things have changed all that significantly. You're paying now for 2 officers the equivalent what the village was paying for 2 officers back in 2018, plus a little inflation. I would be very careful if you're going to ask people on Perry Hill or any other road if they want their own pay, because no matter how you phrase it, some people are going to take it as a promise. So just be careful about how you do that.
Yes, there's a little experience related to that question.
Yeah. And then I think, as I tried to state at the beginning, this is a good problem to have, to try to figure out how to use this local option taxes. And what I would and continue to encourage you to do is to use it for things that, not necessarily that we want, things that we need to do that we can't afford to do in the general fund. And that might mean that you do a recreation center. To make a good argument that that's something that a growing community in the 21st century needs. If we didn't have a local option tax, you wouldn't even be considering. So if that's something that the community really identifies as a need, I don't think we should worry that it's going to take half the local option tax. It gets us something that we need without putting the burden on the taxpayers. The other thing that you have to remember about all these things that you're going to buy because we need them, all you're doing is paying for the acquisition cost. The cost to maintain is going to go into the general fund. So remember that when you're thinking about what these things we might do. So I think this is a good job, and there's a lot of things to consider here. The only thing about Randall Meadow, I've always been a strong advocate for putting things before the voters, and I'm not suggesting that you should step back. My concern is that for a lot of reasons, the people sitting around this table and some of the people sitting in this room really understand why that project is necessary. If you don't get the grant for the $4 million or whatever it is to do the project, I don't think it's going to get lots of play in the general fund. So fingers crossed about the CDBG grant. But my concern is if you really think this 325 gets you to someplace that you need to be, by putting it before the voters and allowing a lot of voters to say, well, that only helps people in a certain neighborhood, it may be something that you want to decide here as opposed to just asking a question for vote. And, that's contrary to how I generally feel about things. And I'm not necessarily advocating it, I'm just telling you to think about it because it's certainly a big benefit to a couple of neighborhoods in the community. And there's a lot of people, who live up where I live that might not even know. So, thank you.
Questions, comments, Jane? Yeah.
One thing, I was really pleased to see what you have in here for sidewalk maintenance and improvements. I got off the select board in 2020, 5 years ago, and we were, for many years, we were really underfunding. I think it was $10,000 a year for sidewalks. So I really support that. Also, the tree inventory, I'm pleased to see it in here. I think it really is a planning tool to understand what the tree health is of our main streets in the village and at Waterbury Center, the tree types that we have, the tree sizes, and to help us move forward with that. And so the report that will come out of this is whether it's funded in this local options tax.
Anyone else online or anyone else in the room or on the board? Questions or comments?
Thanks for all the work on this time.
I guess from my perspective, for Sunday, right? I'd love to know before that if there's anything on here that you think is all wet and should just be stricken from the record. If you think, if there's something you want to add to here and you want Randall Meadow to be paid off over a couple of years, if there's any major revision now, if I'd love to get some feedback now if you have it. I know I threw an awful lot at you and there's a lot to consider here. But if there's something really big, if you think, for example, the Housing Trust Fund should get some additional resources, which I didn't propose, that sort of high level input would be great. If you think it's a reasonable starting point, then keep talking about it.
Questions or comments?
I do think this is a good, reasonable starting point. Applaud you for many of the considerations that you explained tonight. I think they're all pretty well reasoned. This is where we should start.
The only thing I would add, I'm glad to see the $75,000 in for the sheriffs, but I would be very upset if we went down to a one-person from one state. I think just, we might as well not even have it. You know, if we go down to one person, I think it would be very ineffective, and it just doesn't make any, for the little bit of savings that we wind up doing, I think I'd rather add $75,000 into our public safety expense, because I think people are clamoring for that.
And just to be 100% clear, I think the future of policing in Vermont should be that towns like Waterbury band with their neighbors that have departments. And there's economies of scale.
Regional department.
And I'm hoping that at some point there's a select board and a town manager nearby that says, hey, I'd love to offset half my overhead. They're just not in a position to even have that conversation really when they're short-staffed.
And also for clarification, I think Tom was making the argument that we would stick with the two officers, the same contract that we have right now, and that this would just be an additional part-time sheriff deputy adding on.
I'll say, speaking for myself as a board member, I think a little more distinction on the Stanley Lawson Woody FEMA would be useful. I'm also thinking FEMA in terms of Randall Meadow, and just if someone said like, what are you spending on flood resiliency? What are you spending on, work in the downtown versus elsewhere in town? I think useful to have that. I will say I am going to come with noting that we've done a lot of capital planning. Again, that was a question we were asked last year at town meeting, and we've done a lot of homework to prepare on those, but that current assets, what's the plan for them before we're thinking of anything new? I personally don't know on the pool, could be convinced, but and I will say, I think the points on the payroll and account payable, both, I heard you, Tom, say it's your highest priority. So as town manager, I give that credence. And I will say we also implemented a new permitting system. And I will say, I don't think it's been 100% flawless. So I think wanting to make sure we have assurances around end goal is worth it and what's the process, devil is in the detail. So I'm not opposed to the expense. I think it clearly fits in the policy for local option tax spending for one-time fee, but making sure we have a sustainable way to use it if that's the route we're going to go.
Yep.
Tori, I believe, is in the air now. She was on a flight. Amy, I did see your hand very quickly before we need to move on. So, question?
No, I think it was addressed being initial. I just wanted to make sure that there was awareness that the Conservation Commission hasn't yet put its budget recommendation forward yet. I believe we're looking by the 15th, if that's not
Yeah.
perfect. Just wanted to make sure that was noted.
Thanks, Amy. And in general, just to name, we have not looked at general operations for any department yet. So that will likely be a lot of our time on the looking at my schedule. All right, any other last preliminary budget note comments for the board? Great. I will move us on to review of updated special event permit. This may be truncated. Tori was leading this on the select board side, and I think she's popped off now, but we'll just note, if you've been coming to select board meetings regularly, we spend actually quite a lot of portion of our meetings reviewing entertainment and parade closure and other types of requests, and thought that having a more clear, streamlined, and consistent way of doing that would be a benefit. So I believe we have an updated draft of that. I don't know, Tom, if you have any other comments or Cheryl in the role of zoning administrator, on kind of next.
Cheryl may not have seen this, but she probably didn't know the draft.
Great, no worries. One of my questions was gonna be who, if anyone has reviewed it, so it sounds like town staff still needs to review this. Does the board have any questions or comments on this, or do we wanna just take it up again at future meeting?
I'll start by saying that we've been talking about this for 3 years now. And even a once over. It's good to me.
I think I've looked at it, I think it really does capture all the major pertinent details. Anyone applying can always attach anything additional that might be needed. And I think it's a really good attempt to try to get everything in one spot, and we've talked about internally having one-stop shopping.
Right.
So this really goes a long way towards that.
Yeah, I mean, section A really covers, I think, every question that we asked in the meeting regarding an event.
And to Alyssa's point about the software, at one point we'd envisioned the zoning software as potentially customizable enough to have a non-zoning permitting, but another permitting part of that portal. Just hasn't proved to be the case. So I think going this route with a fillable PDF is a really good start towards this.
I'll echo that, speaking on behalf of myself. I think it's a great, I think I would love to have, if they haven't, the town clerk look at it, because one fielding these events, and just noting that I feel like a question we often get is around scale. So to the extent we're defining what you need, if it's 30 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, I feel those are often judgment calls we're making as a board, and some of that is okay and appropriate, but if we want.
At the end, to 9 town clerk review.
Well, yeah, there's updated contact info needed, but just, I guess, question of if at any stage we are mandating things like the fire chief must review anything over X amount of people, as opposed to, while not required, it's strongly encouraged. Again, just thinking of what we're getting questions and making judgment calls to meetings.
I guess my one addition, I don't know if it's an addition to the form or if it's a process that involves me or a process that involves me and the board, but when an event happens, at least since I've been here, aside from Festival of Lights my first year, there's no after action. And perhaps there should be a routine after action process. Again, that could be something you direct me into with other department heads. Perhaps that could just be an agenda item after an event to say, do we have any problems that we need to address going forward? Otherwise, I feel like we get 11 months down the road and the permit comes and there were issues from the prior year we're trying to digest.
So I'm hearing a couple of potential minor revisions, but that we could add this to a next meeting to adopt a final updated version. Does that sound good to the board? Any other questions or comments from the public or others on this? Yep, Roger.
I think it could also be helpful to just have a screening as to who needs to file a permit and who doesn't. Certain qualifications that then require this permit to be filed.
Your backyard party tomorrow?
Yeah. Big one. But only under 1,000 people.
You're saying even before the permit, just to say.
Yeah, just to make it clear, when do you need to file a permit?
Any other questions or comments? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You might want to update with the zoning.
Yes, I crossed it out on my packet as well.
Yeah, we don't want to include names ever, just titles.
Great, so update to have positions as opposed to names. Other questions? Next up, we have the agenda item, like we suggested on town office space, just to do a brief update on that.
Sure, everyone got, there were several emails that came about that showed concern with the historical space down at the end of the hall being merged into really a planning and zoning kind of area. I don't know. Have you seen those?
So, so let me just say, there's no proposal. I
don't think there's something formal.
I joined a historical society meeting to say that, you know, since I've been here, there have been 4 staff that have sat in those areas that have persistently complained about the noise. And so I said, if it makes sense from the historical society's perspective to consider reformatting how the space is used, I'm happy to work with it and consider them. And I also said 3 times over, if it doesn't make any sense, I don't want to ruffle any feathers here. And I also said it's a proposal. I haven't taken formal measurements. We've eyeballed the space and said, maybe this will work. I don't know. I haven't researched the history. I know there are some MOUs about the use of the building. I haven't researched that history because I was presenting to the Historical Society. And I had assumed that as a Historical Society, they would be better equipped to research and know that than I would. And then the final thing I'll say is, at that meeting, Joe Camerata, who's on the Historical Society board, talked about the possibility of consolidating the Historical Society space on 1 floor. And that I believe Joe and other members said that having it split sometimes is confusing for people. So if everything was consolidated, whether it be the 2nd or 1st floor, maybe that makes more sense. And so I'm leaving it to them to see if they have any interest. And if the answer is tomorrow, nope, we don't want change. And I'm done. I'm not pushing it. I'm not lobbying for it. I've made this proposal. And for some reason, just having that conversation got some people really upset when I said 5 times over. I don't want to make anyone upset here. I just want to have this proposal because I've got staff I'm just trying to look out for it. That's it.
Because that's like the 2 emails. It almost sounded like it was a fait accompli. And I didn't know that, so I could really, I didn't want to comment to them back. And that's why I wanted to put it on the record, you know, that at least I hear their concerns, you know, and I think there should be a conversation with the historical.
Yeah, I mean, if people have donated money for the building space, you don't want to
exactly
ignore that. You want to honor, you know, those donations in the history. I don't want to. Last person I want to do to offend anyone here. I just want to think about possibilities. And if the answer back is we can never change the configuration, then maybe a future item for local option tax has like noise remediation for the building. But I was just thinking that we can avoid that. We can shift things a little bit.
Is it mostly the zoning administration, the planning director space that was concerned? I think it sounds.
That and having staff upstairs is pretty isolating.
Yeah.
For the historical society and for us.
It's good and bad for different reasons.
Yeah.
May I speak to this strictly in my role as of the Historical Society?
Sure.
So first of all, I do want to reiterate that we are only having conversations and exploring ideas at this stage. For the Historical Society, now is a convenient time to have these conversations because we are beginning a redesign of the exhibits and the museum space. We are updating, we are refreshing. It's been, since this building opened, since most of it was changed. We've done small things here and there. Our board and our volunteers have since gone through a significant amount of training that will allow us to essentially level up our ability to present Waterbury's history to the community, to the public. So this is a convenient time for us to have that conversation. Neither party, the town or the Historical Society, is giving up any space. The conversation is limited to how we might rearrange the existing space without making any structural changes to said space to better serve each party's daily operations and overall mission. To that point, the Historical Society, the museum, is staying put within the footprint of Dr. James's house with at least as much space as we currently occupy, should any rearrangement happen. Finally, we are 100% committed to mission-driven decision-making. And if anybody is interested in reading our mission, our vision, and understanding our strategic priorities and how this kind of conversation might align with those priorities, you can always go to the About tab on our website, waterburyhistoricalsociety.org, and open that Strategic Plan 2030 document. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing is there has been conversation. I will note that earlier in our meeting tonight, there was a note that having conversations about things in public, like paving a road or moving a space, can sometimes elicit a variety of reactions because folks don't know the things. So anything else to add? I'm just noting, like, I'm hearing the town and the Historical Society have had conversations. We are not voting or asking to approve any changes at this point. Again, it was just a conversation. We probably don't need to share the paving plan. Anything else on this? Right?
No, that's, I just wanted to get it on the record, and see where we're at, and it sounds like there's gonna be a good dialogue and hopefully come to a sound decision.
And just maybe, Tom, if you were to make changes, is that something that would need to come to the board?
I think given the sensitivity of it, I would bring it to the board 100%.
All right, that brings us to Select Board and Municipal Manager informational updates. If there's anything we haven't already covered, again, just opportunity for updates. And information sharing. Mike, anything to share?
No, nothing, Amy just brought up, the Conservation Commission is looking at some, funding, and they're getting their numbers and stuff together.
Natural disaster preparedness committee meeting is canceled this month. So no.
I participated in the final interviews of the rec director candidates week before Thanksgiving. It's in the final stages at this point. And then there's a special meeting of the rec committee on the 16th of December. What's that for? Special meetings.
I don't think I have any additional updates since our last meeting. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Quiet week because of the holiday. Reminder, Festival of Lights this weekend. So coming out Saturday night. Second, shameless plug, not related to town business, but I promised him I'd say it. Higher Ground, Saturday at noon. My son is playing the guitar solo in the Vermont Spectacular. So if you go and cheer that, I'll buy you a drink, whatever time that is.
Can't buy your son.
That's right.
Awesome.
And I'm sorry, this is for the next item.
Oh, for dinner.
And one more, not shameless plug, but I think it's a good plug. I just want to thank Tom from Maxie's for their wonderful event that we approved. It was really very thoughtful, I think well attended, great breakfast, great local music, very well received by the town. Thank you, Tom.
Awesome. So then that brings us to next meeting, which is review agenda items for next meeting, starting with time of next meeting, which I did not know as I was putting this agenda together. We are meeting on a Sunday. I don't know if folks have timing preferences.
I can be here by 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No prior.
No, that's when I work. It's prior. I work lunch Saturday and Sunday.
I thought we picked this date because you could attend.
No, we picked this date and I protested. But then we collectively picked this date.
Yeah, I wasn't aware. As someone who wanted to meet on the 13th, and then I think folks couldn't make it this date. My understanding was this was the date we can make it. So you can attend at 3.
Yeah. I can probably try and schedule it, but
I was assuming it was gonna be.
yeah. So did I.
Before lunch.
Yeah.
7 a.m.
I can probably make it work.
For what time?
Wasn't my first choice date. I'll be driving from Massachusetts that morning, but that's okay.
Oh.
In my, that's why it was certainly
How
not my
fast is
first
your
choice
car?
date. I had previous plans for the weekend, but was just gonna cancel them to come for this.
So it is a special meeting that has not been warned.
I mean, but I can be, I guess my question, I was gonna advocate for not 8 a.m., but 9 a.m. is fine.
9 a.m. would be great for me.
I love that.
Why are we not meeting on the 8th? Are we meeting on the 8th?
The 8th is a second Monday, so we meet first and third Mondays
Yeah,
typically,
why
so
did
first
we
and
move it?
15th.
From a Monday to Sunday.
This was our all-day budget. I
It is,
believe
yeah,
the
it's supposed
first
to be your
proposed
all-day
date
budget.
was Saturday, the 13th, which I'm still available all day for if we want to go back to the 13th. As I recall, you and Roger both had conflicts, or you two people had conflict.
I have a conflict on the 13th.
My,
Sorry.
Thanks.
If we want, my meeting on the 13th is in South Burlington from 8:30 to noon. So I could do,
no, I can make the 7th work. I can fit it in.
One's gonna take one for the team and be creative on the 7th. I'm hearing 9 a.m. as the start time. 9
Works for me.
9 to noon and then 1 to question mark. We discuss it, right? Or we could work through lunch and.
I suggest we just work through lunch and maybe go 9 to 1, fine for that. It's 4 hours is a good length of time.
Okay, scheduled 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Excellent, so time, location still here, presuming this is important. Well, I was gonna say, assuming there isn't something else that we can do, it's not problematically reserved. That brings us to agenda items besides budget, if there are any.
I was gonna say, I don't think it's at this meeting, but perhaps the one on the 15th. I'd like to bring up the idea of forming that committee to look at ways to improve town meeting. Again, before we lose the idea. I don't think we're gonna get much public input on this Sunday morning meeting. So I don't think that's the right place to do it.
15th, which will also be budget. Tom, did you have something? you wanted to note?
I would expect by then for sure, I will have a recommendation on a recreation director, which has to be approved by the select board. I leave it to your discretion if you think the Sunday appointment conversation would be appropriate. It's up. The charter specifies the select board, as we went over a few weeks ago, approves department heads. You can choose to meet with that person. The process is up to you. But I'll formally deliver you a recommendation. I hope pretty quickly.
Minutes to follow up, update you on our formation.
Do you want to do that on the 7th or on the 15th?
The 15th is fine.
And on the 7th, it's gonna be just budgeting.
Well, we can make that decision here.
I'm curious about the structure. I will say I found tonight was very effective. I mean, in some ways, I think departments are a little more straightforward because it's more standard. You know, these are all unusual or more policy driven versus some of the standard what you expect operations. I'm curious if it's worth us having like a general conversation about any of the priorities. But whether we do that, I guess that's just a question of how we structure our 4 hours. I think they're all pertaining to the budget, but if we want to say like, let's talk about just random matter one, if we're doing it now, just policing it if we do it in half. I guess feedback welcome if folks want to just run through everything and have the discussion as we go, we can do that. If we want to do a more general planning and priorities conversation at the beginning, we can do that too.
I guess the biggest thing I'd suggest you consider, I know it's very early and we're a long way from that, but the biggest thing I suggest you consider is, I know there's a policy about the warning of agencies that get funding and a dollar amount, but I would suggest that there's some pretty big meat and potatoes in the budget here, and perhaps you should consider a policy where that dollar amount is raised, or some also consideration where it hasn't changed in a long time, just embedded in the budget, because I think those conversations at town meeting day take up a long time. And if there's going to be a conversation about policing, for example, just think at some point time management's a real problem.
So for Sunday, maybe revisit, I mean, we had like the threshold. Let's see if we can get an updated list of who's requested and what amount and what we might want to consider. This is Melissa's gestures for putting in the warning in what location based on our policy. So I'll say policy for funding requests. Well, I'm sure we can fill 4 hours with budgeting and also check back in about the 15th at the end of that meeting. 9 to 1 achievable for you?
I can make it work. Yeah, I mean, I don't take vacations, so I've got PTO that I can burn.
Well, I'm sorry that we said, like I said, I thought we had moved it. And
It's okay, my work schedule works out so that I can just bring someone in an hour earlier and make the whole day work.
Awesome. Any other agenda items for next meeting? All right. If not, we had executive session and I didn't write it, but I assume we have labor negotiations and potential real estate transactions.
And personnel matter.
And personnel.
They're all interrelated, right?
So we would need motions around those 3 to enter executive session with the municipal manager.
Yeah, I can do it. I move to find that premature public knowledge of. It's not even listed.
I know, I just had labor negotiations,
Labor-
personnel, and real estate transactions.
Labor negotiation, personnel matters and real estate transactions will place the town of Waterbury at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
Jinx. Okay, it was offered to Roger. So we have motion by Kane, second by Roger. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Move to enter executive session and invite the municipal manager.
We will go into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?